Okay, so we're going to fly through kind of building the team and starting to get some of the, talking a little bit about what you need around you to be successful. And there's a whole bunch of places that we could go with this. We could spend a half a day on, the team building components, and I'll probably rely on some mentor feedback here as we buzz through this. But we're going to try to wrap up about 2:25 or so, and then get back on schedule with the other items. So, the image behind me, who recognizes that? What is it?
It's the Miracle on Ice.
The Miracle on Ice. Okay, so what happened with the Miracle on Ice?
Let's see, beat the Russians, or was that when they beat the Finns for the final? Russians. No, the Russians.
Right, so they had to beat the Russians in the semifinal to then go and ultimately win the final. What's that?
Who doesn't remember this stuff? It's so crazy.
People haven't lived through it.
I was going to say, who was born after 1980, right? Anyway, so
Tomorrow is my 39th wedding anniversary, so I was married in 1980. That's how old I am. Anyway,
wow. Not to date yourself though, right? Yeah. Okay, so who's seen the movie Miracle? Raise your hand if you've seen the movie Miracle. Okay, it's a great movie. There's a lot of sort of team building, right? I mean, one of the reasons that this team worked, we brought together basically a group of amateurs playing professionals theoretically, right, as kind of the backdrop. There's a great line in the movie though that says after the team was kind of messing around and they were in the stages of forming the team, right? The coach had them doing calisthenics to the point where they were like, really unhappy, throwing up, that type of thing. And effectively, one of the lessons he was trying to teach him is that the name that was on the front of the jersey was way more important than the name that was on the back of the jersey, right? Because they needed to let go of their individual identities. They may have been the star at their school, but that didn't really matter. They needed to play together, not play as individuals. And that is really true, I think, within any organization, right? Not just an entrepreneurial one, but it becomes the team that you surround yourself with in an entrepreneurial organization becomes even more critical. And who that is, what that looks like, how well you get along with them, that is the difference maker, right? If you're trying to get something done and there's two of you and one individual is choosing not to spend the time and energy and effort, you're going to run into problems. And so understanding and figuring out the questions of like, well, how do I know whether this person's a fit or not? My current organization that I'm with, I basically got to know the CEO over about an 8-month period. And we were still both kind of having the conversation. I was consulting. I wasn't sure I wanted to jump into the 18-hour days again. And if I was going to do that, I wanted to make sure it was the right organization. He didn't want to hire somebody if it wasn't the right fit. So how do you build that team? So you're going to need a bunch of different roles, right? You're going to need people that can sort of teach you things, right? Specific skills. You're going to need coaches, folks that can, observe what you're doing, have been there before, maybe provide, feedback and guidance. They're not necessarily teaching you how to, make that wrist shot or whatever, but they're going to observe what's happening and give you feedback, right? You're going to need mentors. I always get asked after this presentation, what's the difference between a coach and a mentor? And we could divide that, but you understand the general point, right? You're going to need to go and get some additional help, right? You're going to need advisors. And I think that advisors are slightly different in the sense that, these are individuals that can sometimes be paid, right? And it could be a legal advisor, as an example. So we'll get into that in a minute. You're also going to need service providers, such as legal counsel. So, hey, I want to get this thing commercialized. As we were talking about commercialization, one of the questions came up was, do I need to incorporate before I go to market? What's the answer to that question? Yes, you should, 100%. Why?
Liability.
Protection, that's right. You don't want people coming back and asking for your house. So you want somebody that's going to be experienced in company creation, that they're going to have a boilerplate of documents that they can get to you quickly, that you want them to be credible, not necessarily to the investment community, but ultimately if you're going to hire legal counsel, you want them for more than being an attorney and giving you documents. You want them to be able to make introductions for you, and when you say, oh, I work with Cooley or I work with Holland & Hart, they know who that is and they're comfortable with it. As a matter of fact, I just noticed Holland & Hart has a career services section in this building on this floor, right? So there's a credibility component that you're going to want, right? you should be getting a discount from them. In some cases, what I've negotiated is a 6-month complete deferral of any fees. And it's not until either a funding event, and even after that 6 months, you only just start paying a little bit as you go, right? Any good emerging growth law firm will be willing to do some kind of a deal with you. So for the mentors in the room, how many of you have got a deal from an attorney ever? Okay, so there you go. It's definitely a possibility. You don't need to start paying $550 an hour immediately. Partners at Cooley are like $1,200 an hour. So it's not cheap. In a lot of cases, you may even want to try to negotiate an incorporation document or an incorporation series of documents at a fixed fee, which they'll often do if it's a straightforward kind of transaction. You want to kind of look for IP counsel if you're going to be bringing something that is unique to market that you want to patent, and that does not need to be the same firm. In a lot of cases, having a boutique firm can make way more sense. So make sure that you're sort of watching out for those out there that are like, oh yeah, we file patents, really inexpensively. You may not get what you think you're getting. Okay. One of the things that I've done in the past is I've found IP counsel in different locations, right? They're not necessarily any better or worse, but if you can find somebody in Lincoln, Nebraska, and they're half the price as somebody in Boulder, it may make sense to jump on the phone, right? Maybe take a road trip. It's a boring road trip. I've done it a lot. So one of the other things that comes up, I built it already, but the very bottom line is this idea of, well, I don't have any money, I can't really afford to pay for this, so what I'll do is I'll incorporate and I'll just give them some equity. I'll give them options, right? Why don't you want to do that to the mentors or anybody that's had experience in the room? Why is that not the best idea? It's certainly an option. People do it.
Well, in the beginning, the value of the company is low.
Right.
So I have to give up a lot of shares.
Mm-hmm.
$4,000.
Yep. Go ahead.
I think, don't you also want independent advice?
Okay. Independence is also helpful. Yep. Agreed.
It forces evaluation on the company when it's not ready.
It can do that as well. Yep.
The attorneys might be much more savvy than you are.
They definitely are. They definitely are. But hopefully you're retaining counsel that's not in that position of trying to, swindle you, but you never know.
Since you're business partners, are you married?
Yep. That's right. You get really tied in. Go ahead.
I just say, usually wouldn't even do actual equity, we do a convertible note.
That's an option, sure.
Which even that, I would say, is not the best idea.
Yeah.
Keeping it simple.
That's right. So when you create an option pool, you can offer that not just to employees, but you can offer that to service providers. Matter of fact, most option pools, the language used in the plan documents talk about the fact that it mentions service provider, not necessarily employee, right? So, all of these reasons are good reasons, right? One, you could end up giving up way more of the company than you think. I'm just going to go ahead and get this, see who it is. 303, 404, just kidding. All right, so I think, Mike, you had something as well you were going to add?
Everybody knows how much money's worth, and so it's just a nice medium for trade. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of money sometimes, but it keeps you honest.
That's right. So one of the other things that hasn't been mentioned is that investors don't necessarily like messy cap tables, right? So what if the what's that?
What's a cap?
Thank you. Thanks, Gene. I appreciate it. It's like we planned that. So a capitalization table.
The funding stream lecture.
That's right. As you give away parts of the company, you end up basically creating a list of the people who own parts of the company, right? That's your capitalization table, effectively. And investors like that to be cleaner, right? So if you have 300 people on that list, it becomes more complicated to try to get things done, especially if in your bylaws there are rules about a percentage of your ownership needing to approve an item or something like that. So it's not likely that that's going to happen, but I have seen that happen. And it's not fun to try to deal with that. So for all of the reasons we discussed, I wouldn't necessarily suggest leading service providers, because you'll hear this asked a lot. I'll do it at half my rate, but I want the other half paid in equity. Will you do that for me? I'd say try to avoid it if you can, right? Just keep asking. Okay, so You're also going to need, technologist or an inventor. That in this case may be, some of you in this room. Obviously, this is really important in the beginning to sort of demonstrate the value, to prove the technology works. Find a way to really get traction and get into the market. If you don't have that level of understanding, it can be kind of a challenge, right? There's also an IP component, right? That individual founder may be continuing to innovate and find new things to help with competitiveness in the marketplace. The problem is that if you start, especially as a sole founder, your role is going to change as things move on, because you ultimately need to become more and more specialized as your business grows. That's the only way to sort of really get through it. And in order to kind of continue down this path, you need to start adding in other functions into the organization. So along with kind of the technical doer, the person or the founder, you're going to have an individual that's going to be really resourceful, going to be hands-on. Again, their role is going to shift as the company grows. And you want to marry that individual with somebody that's been down this path before, that's been in a startup, if you're trying to commercialize and get to market at the end of the day. You really want somebody that's been proven hands-on experience. Finding somebody that's been in a really big business that you're trying to, of the market segment you're trying to target, can be okay. But unless that individual's lived in startup world where it's like, hey, let me go home and work on the accounting, and then I'm taking out the trash, and then I'm building a PowerPoint, and they're having to actually do all the hard work, and there's not a team of people helping them, they can sometimes be not a perfect fit. So you want someone that's going to be as passionate as the original founder, or as you are in this case. You want them to be articulate, to be convincing and credible in front of an investor, in front of a banker, in front of customers, right? And they're going to need to be diverse in their skill set. You're going to want them to be working on a bunch of different things. And ultimately, this individual sort of startup person would kind of down select over time. And they might be the president of the company to start, or a president, but ultimately end up in a marketing role once the company gets really big. So as a 5-person company, that's their role. As a 200-person company, they may be responsible for running a particular market segment, right? Very big difference. Often a person that's in that role is going to just jump to the next company, not ride it to 200 people at the end of the day. You want to start hiring subject matter experts. And you're going to kind of focus on patching the gaps that you have as you're trying to move through. And being resourceful is one of the most important things to do. This individual will ultimately settle into a specific job title. Okay.
Can you just mention that maybe also the founder may also be down?
Yep.
So you may be CEO now, but you may be CEO
Yep.
later.
100%, and that's.
They move on.
That's right, and you may move on. You may decide that it's way more fun to have an idea and try to drive it and bring it to market. There are far fewer Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, right? Conception, code it in a room, whether he stole the tech or not, who knows? But at the end of the day, you're usually not the same. That's not the person testifying in front of Congress 10 years later when you've got a multi-billion-dollar company, right? The capacity and the range of skill set that he had was strong. As a matter of fact, though, you could say all the trouble that Facebook is in right now is maybe that he didn't sort of catch up and he wanted to be king instead of trying to resolve and hire people that could help come in and sort of do that, right? I bet he was having way more fun building Facebook and riding it up in 2009 than he's having right now, right? Because the hits just keep on coming. So that's a really good point. And that's, I think, something that as a founder you should almost expect to be the case. If you don't think that, you're limiting the growth of the company. You should be willing to make that change at any point in time. All right, so what team members do you need? Depends on where you are, right? What needs to happen? Are you trying to demonstrate technology? Or are you still trying to develop it, right? Are you creating the company? So maybe the technology's all there, you've got MVP, you're ready to go to market. I have no idea how to incorporate, right? So the person that you need in that situation is going to be very different. Getting into marketing, right? Starting to get into sales. Now you've done sales and marketing and you've got your first dozen customers. I have no idea how to scale the business now. How do I now go build a sales and marketing engine that's really going to drive this growth in a dramatic way? That's a very specific type of person. And you can find those people in the business, but you want demonstrated evidence that they've done that before, right? And even if they have the demonstrated evidence, you need to make sure it applies to your size your type of organization, your industry, all of those things will make a big difference. So somebody could come in and scale Uber and do a miserable job at scaling a B2B company, right? Two very different things, and the subtlety matters, okay? So one of the things when I think about new organizations starting, you're sort of, all of the different functions of the business are all growing at different levels. You're maturing each function in a different stage or phase, right? If you were to build out your manufacturing capability for when the business is 5 years down the road, you're gonna have overinvested in that. So a lot of times businesses will start getting their supply chains all lined up and whatnot without really having the sales and marketing engine driven or built out. And so what you need to do is, in some sense, find a way to get sales and marketing really moving forward, and then circle back around and build your capacity to meet those needs. Now that's a little tricky, right? Because sometimes sales and marketing all of a sudden outpace your ability to drive. I mean, for those of you that watch Shark Tank, I feel like a third of the people that are on there are like, well, I sold a bunch and I couldn't deliver. I actually had JCPenney interested, and now I'm here because I want you to help me scale my business, right? And so that is a thing that happens, but I'd certainly rather be in that situation than I bought a manufacturing facility and I can't fill its capacity. Right? I mean, that's a huge problem. And so thinking about how your organization needs to evolve and mature through those different functions and when to do that is a bit of an art, right? It's a bit of a learning curve, and that's where you want somebody that's been there and done that before to come in and provide that guidance so you don't have to learn that lesson the hard way when you don't make it and the business runs out of cash, okay? All right, so throughout all this, of course, the people may not change, but your roles definitely are going to. So how do you find qualified people? How many people have hired somebody here? Interviewed and hired somebody? Okay, just about everyone, all right. Was it easy? How many of you hired somebody that you then realized was not a fit? Okay, that's pretty much everybody. How many people fired someone? Had to terminate somebody because they were not a fit. All right, well, it's, pretty much once you get into that hiring thing, you're also on the firing side. So, it's pretty broadly understood that you should hire slowly and fire quickly. Why is that? Why should you hire slowly and fire quickly?
Same reason that Gene brought up earlier, which is people are really good at talking. How many of you have dated someone for months and was like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
Are we going to do a show of hands? I'm sorry. Sorry.
Exactly. So same thing with interviewing. A lot of people can hide a lot of their flaws for a really long time. Yep, absolutely. And so there are people that are very good at interviewing. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Go ahead, Alex.
And once that decision's made that that person's not a fit, it's best not to let that fester or that hang out and then sour the organization possibly.
Yep. Absolutely, 100%. Especially when you're in startup mode, the impact of making a bad hire is accelerated, and I would say that in startup world, everything that a normal business goes through is amplified, right? So you hire a salesperson that's supposed to drive, let's call it $500,000 in sales in the first year. 6 months in, they haven't sold a thing. What have you lost? Not only the 6 months, but now you got to hire somebody new and give them 6 months. And the opportunity cost is just enormous, and you literally may not make it at that point, right? So you need to be really smart about sort of how you're going to do that, and understanding what your values are, the specific skill sets you're looking for. And this is an area where I feel most organizations don't actually choose to engage the external environment, right? So the question was asked, how do you know whether a partner is good or not? Same thing you should be doing with employees, references, talking and understanding, looking at their LinkedIn recommendations. I mean, I know that sounds trite, but all of those boxes getting checked is a really important thing to do. And having a systematic process is way more important than, wow, I need sales, I need to hire somebody. Hey, you can fog a mirror. Are you open to start on Friday? Great, let's do it. Okay. So the other key or the other challenge is that most people hire for skill. I need a salesperson. Hey, you've met your quote on your resume. 5 of the last 6 years, you look pretty good. You can talk a great game about selling in a complex environment. You've sold to manufacturers before, whatever the case is. But they ultimately end up taking out that sales rep because they're so arrogant and they don't listen to anybody in the organization that as you're trying to rapidly do new product development, they're not bringing the right thing to market, right? Really painful lesson. So how do you avoid that kind of thing? Mentors, anybody? I mean, lots of people have hired here, so how do you avoid that?
We use assessments now.
Okay, what kind of assessments?
Hogan and Workplace Big Five.
Okay.
Workplace Big Five is really great.
Yep.
Because it focuses on communication, teamwork, interactivity.
Sure.
It's not the only tool, it's also legal for using in hiring.
Yep, and that's a really important point I was going to make, right? Obviously, if you're going to use some sort of an assessment, that'd be an appropriate time to check in with legal counsel to make sure that you're not discriminating in any way and that you don't have someone saying that the test was unfair for whatever reason, right? What else?
So this is a weird one. I personally haven't done it yet, but my friend who hires a lot of people does it. He goes to a specific restaurant, tells the waiter to intentionally be kind of an a-hole.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And sees how that person reacts. It's a real good way of seeing, again,
It's
it's
actually,
like.
it's actually illegal.
It's
Illegal for this restaurant. It might be useful.
Yeah. I think it's a real good way of seeing, again, kind of same thing with dating, like how do we treat the waiter?
Yep.
Just make a point of, there's a difference also
It's
between
literally
when
the
you're
same
an entrepreneurial company and when you're a Fortune 500.
For sure.
Right? And later on, of course, you've got hiring all along these ways. In the beginning, you're really looking to your network,
Mm-hmm.
and you have A, B, and C people.
Yep.
And you just get A people, which when you go talk to your friend, you say, what about so-and-so? And they say, A person. I would do 5 more companies with that guy.
Yep.
Right? And that's who you take on the early stages, I think.
Yeah, I think you try as best you can. What if the A person is wanting to get paid and you can't afford them yet, right? What if, and this is where it starts to get really sticky for me is, one of the founders I was working with, consulting with, she, brilliant individual, the business was really just starting to get traction but wasn't quite there yet and really couldn't afford to pay people. So how did she try to attract talent to get the business to where it needed to be? And that's a totally different challenge. So one of the other things you can do is just ask behavioral questions, right? And start to drive in and see what you can figure out, right? Tell me about a time when you disagreed with someone about a direction of a project, right? Most of you, I'm guessing, have either been asked these questions or have asked as you go. But the only way that this really works for me is if you use kind of the STAR method for kind of listening to it. So who knows what, STAR is an acronym, who knows what it stands for? So it's
Situation, task, action, result.
very good. So situation, task, action, and result. So when you ask somebody, tell me about a time when you disagreed with someone about a project or direction, if you get, and this happens a lot unfortunately, is you get a lot of S&T. Well, the situation was that my boss was a jerk, and I didn't really like the direction because there's no way we should have gotten into consulting, and on and on and on, and you never actually get the action or the result. So the question of, some people are really good at talking and convincing you of other things. What you need to dive into is the A and the R. Great, so your boss and you disagreed on whether you should launch a consulting service. What specific thing did you do to try to convince them of this other thing? Or what happened in that specific situation? Great, so you went to his office and you said blah, blah, blah. Okay, so then what happened when they kicked you out or they didn't like your idea? What did you do next, right? That level of detail is really where you need to be if you're going to get a good sense of what happens. Of course, the past is not always a perfect predictor of the future, but it's a pretty good predictor. Regardless, interviewing's been basically proven to be one of the worst ways to find the right fit. The best way is to find someone that's willing to come on board and to actually try working with them for some period of time. You're going to find out way more doing that than trying to interview. Go for it.
I have a question for, all of this is great if you have unlimited amounts of money, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the person has the most experience and all that. But if you have, a limited amount of money and you can either hire 2 people who maybe are, pretty young, so they don't have, like you're saying, they haven't done this 3 times before. Maybe they're just coming out of school or something, so they may have all the skills you want, but none of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
You can hire 2 of those people, or you can hire 1 person who has all this experience, but you know, that's only one person to do one thing. Like, how do you, as a startup, I feel like that's what you face a lot.
I think it's really situational. So here's the thing. If you've built an amazing network of mentors and coaches and people who can give you that broader guidance, then it might be perfectly effective to hire the 2 individuals that have the skill you need to get to market, right? In other cases, I've seen that be a total train wreck, especially in large organizations. I would always rather have fewer smarter people than lots of people with communication and challenges and whatever else and just a broader base. Jean?
The other part of that answer you already put up there, it really depends on what you need done next.
Yep.
If the what you need done next is a really heavy lift, and probably the best way to get that heavy lift thing done in the time frame you need to get it done is to bite the bullet and hire the more expensive, experienced person to do it. So it really depends on what do you need next to get to your milestone. And when they successfully do that, then what happens in terms of money? You know, is it easier to afford them then because they've accomplished the thing that you really need them for?
I have this conversation with the founder I'm currently working with all the time. He operates with what I would say is an abundance mindset, right? So he's like, yeah, let's go get that lease. And I'm like, you're going to triple the cost of where we sit. Why are we doing that right now, right? And at the same time, we've got a CFO who operates with, you know, this like scarcity model of it's the Great Depression, and neither of those things are true. And so I like stand in the middle and I'm like, okay, so what are we going to do here, right? That's right. And you have to figure out what that right method is. And honestly, some of that is experience and it's about making the right decision. And in a lot of cases, frankly, the founder has been right. Go ahead.
And should you be one founder hiring people, or should you look for 2 other founders to come in
Yep.
with you, share on the initial piece of things, and then worry about hiring later on?
That's right. That's exactly right. So that's part of the answer. If you're like, I'm an individual and I don't have the money, what do? You get creative and find ways to do things like that. So, Mike?
I don't know if you're going to cover this, but in that line, if you're bringing someone into the company who's going to have a significant role or equity,
Yep.
to go through all the things Dean said, you need the prenups.
Oh, for sure.
You need the termination agreements. You need to have it all up front. So not 2 years later, you're going like, I want to leave the company, well, and I own half the company. You don't want to argue that.
So Steve, did you and Scott put something formal together in terms of like breakup agreement and all that sort of stuff? Or was it a little bit more like, hey, yeah, this is fun, let's go do it?
Before or after you moved out of the bedroom?
Yeah, no, we have an operating agreement. It's evolved, of course.
Sure.
You know, because we were pretty young in terms of our understanding of the space when we started. But yeah, definitely, you know, we've tried to leverage as much resources that can sort of guide us, right? So board members, advisors, you know, folks that have done this before we got to the lawyers and said, this is what we need.
Yep.
You know? So it was a lot of advice that we had to put in place, sort of the...
Like figure out even how to do it, right?
Yep.
Yep. And that's what I would advise is, you know, if you're thinking about doing that, get advice from somebody who's been there before. You don't need a board until you've received really an equity investment or you've incorporated in some way and something more formal has come on where you need this sort of fiduciary responsibility. It's totally okay though to create a board of advisors, right, that are going to give you guidance, advice, and it's okay to you know, to incent them with warrants if you need to or options, right? You know, again, if you can avoid that in the early stages, that would be ideal because you get a much better sense of what the valuation of the company is going to be and have a better sense of it. So we are effectively out of time, unfortunately, but there's lots more to talk about in the team building side of things. The one last comment I guess I would leave everyone with is that, you know, a self-assessment of sort of who you really are, right, as you're coming into an organization, either starting it, coming in as a co-founder, understand, you know, are you the technical co-founder? Do you want to be that business person? What do you know or not know in reality, right? How do you start to go and build based on what you assess yourself as, both skills and behaviors? What do you need to do to plug your gaps, right? So instead of trying to go around and fix your weaknesses, focus on your strengths and try to backfill who you need on the team that plugs where your weaknesses are, because you're going to get to where you need to be a lot faster if you can do that. Okay? All right, so.
Just ask a question around that. I mean, I think every team that comes through my office says basically I have an incredible amount of work to be done, and either I already have a day job, I'm in school, I'm really busy, and there's just so much work and it's all across the board. How would you recommend that they start thinking about, I mean, who's that person? You know, do you short-term hire an attorney? Do you look for another grad student? How do you think about building just the very first person to work with?
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to get to person number 2, again, it's kind of situational. It really depends on what stage, what you're trying to get done. If it's, I need to incorporate, I don't have time to put those documents together, that's a very different answer than I'm trying to get an MVP out the door, right? And I think the solution is creative. You know, that's one of the things that I really appreciate about business is that, you know, you can be really creative in those situations. You find somebody that's passionate, that's going to do hard, you know, it's going to work hard and get things done. And if they fit the need that you have from a skill set and a behavioral perspective, then go for it, right? I mean, you were effectively in that same situation, weren't, right? So how did you pick the first person?
Poorly.
Okay.
No, the two of us had sort of the same, similar passion, so it was easy for the two of us. But then, you know, what we did with our third hire was hire a friend, and it was not good, right? We just picked whoever we could find as quickly as possible. And, you know, now we hire people on 6-month increments at first to say, okay, is this working out? So that it's sort of like, do you understand that this 6 months is really important for all of us to get comfortable, and we'd like to keep it longer.
Yep. I mean, we're coming up to employee number 35 in my business, and we still hire data journalists on a 6-month kind of probation period, and they become a full employee after 6 months.
And I guess I'd also add, you know, that interim tag is really critical, right? It allows you to sort of vet the folks. But if you transition into some other space, right, as you pivot constantly, it's okay if you say, well, we've pivoted into this entire space, the resources aren't there.
Yep.
You know? And the grad student process is pretty functional, right? I mean, finding a grad student to help push the boulder up the hill is great. And always using that term interim is important. Like for me at Living Inc., I'm our chief technology officer. I don't know jack squat about ink. I do know a lot about genetic engineering. We do some of that at Living Inc., a lot of that. But at some point in time, I may not be a good fit to run our company, and I need to understand that. So I may be interim myself, right? And so assigning that interim title allows you to say, hey, we positioned ourselves in a different market, and we need somebody else. And you know, I think putting that on a grad student, saying interim, you're going to learn a lot, gives you a chance to hopefully find somebody who works like forced labor, right? Gets paid like forced labor, is interested in learning, right? And takes instruction on. And those are pretty good positions. And then if you put interim on there, it's that ability to say, yeah, not the best fit.
Yep. Okay.
Quick question.
Well, Sally's coming up. Go ahead.
Just like what about the institutional capacity building? If you are going through a revolving door of grad students, now you're training to back up the next student, and we've run into this. How do you keep that institutional knowledge up and efficient? You know what I'm asking?
Overlap?
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here isn't so much a revolving door where you're cycling people through the same functions. It's you're completing things.
Okay.
You're bringing somebody in to get this done.
Okay.
Yep.
And then when that's done, you're evaluating.
And by the way, done includes training documentation, documentation of how it was done, all of that. That's actually scoped into that initial project work, right? And you don't let them say, okay, well, you're just going to do whatever you want, kind of come in and whatever, and they leave, and you don't know what's happened, right? And they're in everything.
That's a wonderful point, that instead of thinking things in terms of a year time length, you're always thinking in terms of a practical milestone of where we're going to get to.
So there's more slides in this presentation. It's out in the instructor deck if you want to go through it. I think they're fairly self-explanatory. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sally.
Sweet.